Welcome to Shape on Shape, a conversation with the boogeyman. Please welcome to the stage, old and new, OG and new school, Michael Myers actors Nick Castle and Jude Courtney! Too cool, man. This is too cool. Well, we thought this was such a fun idea to kind of have you both together and kind of have you just have a conversation with each other. And I'll moderate it. And if you'd like to ask a question, go ahead and line up here behind these gentlemen. Let's go start out with a question of Nick. I know this backstory, but it's a fun story. Talk about your two perspectives of how you both got cast as Michael Myers. One is right place, right time, or maybe wrong place, wrong time.
Well, for me, is this on?
That's on.
Okay. I was a film student at the University of Southern California and met a certain Mr. John Carpenter back then, and so we became good friends just doing our little movies together. And then when he was going to prep Halloween, I was just checking out, see what he was doing. I was on the set prior to them shooting, and I said, you know, John, I would love just to hang around and be on the set because I want to be a director too. And he went, okay. And then he thought about it for a second and said, why don't you be the guy under the mask? Then you'll be here, have to be here anyhow. Well, we had to pay them something, like $25 a day. You'll get that. I went, this is a great job. And he knew I couldn't act. So he knew that was the safest job for me to have, in front of the cameras. But that's how it happened.
Yeah, just because you were, again, right place, right time, and you had a cool walk, right? You had an interesting walk. And James, what about you?
Well, I had, at this point in the game, I had focused on writing and producing my own films. So I had, in my mind, I made a decision that I wasn't going to audition. If I got a call and someone wanted me to work, I did a couple of commercials, for friends. But other than that, I was just focused on making my own films. And so I moved back to Columbia, South Carolina, where I'm from, and bought a little place and just got to work. I was writing away, and I got a call from the stunt coordinator on Halloween 2018, who was also the coordinator on the Rob Zombie films. And he's like, hey Jimmy, we're doing another Halloween. I was like, dude, awesome, man, that would be fun. And I knew they were shooting in South Carolina. I knew they were shooting in Charleston, but I wasn't going to reach out. I made a decision that I wasn't going to reach out for anything anymore. And so he said, yeah, well, so when I read the script, I called David Gordon Green and Malcolm Codd and said, guys, the script is different than any other Halloween. The guy who plays Michael Myers is going to have really deep acting chops and be a really good stuntman. There's not many of those guys around. And David Gordon Green said, okay, well, he's got to be 6'3", 200 pounds, and he's got to be in his 60s. Who do you know? And so, and Ron knew me for 30 years, but didn't think of me. It's my good friends Jennifer and Chris Nielsen. He's a stunt performer. He said, well, Jimmy Courtney. So I got the call, and Ron said, do you want to do it? I said, yeah, I'll do it. So I went down to Charleston, about an hour and a half away from where I live, and they put me on tape, and we talked about all things, killing. My first movie was, I played psychopathic killer. I stayed an entire weekend in a lockdown with paranoid schizophrenics, murderers. And, but they're all doing the Thorazine shuffle, so, no one was all that dangerous. But I learned a lot about psychopathic killing, schizophrenia, and all those fun little things, and so we're going to talk about that and some other fun stuff. And then I went out and got my pickup truck, because if you're in the South, you have to have a pickup truck. And I didn't even get out of the parking lot. I got a call from Blumhouse in California, and they're like, "Are you available to shoot the film?" I was like, "Yeah." So as an actor, that's the kiss of death. I mean, if someone reaches out and says, "Are you available?" and then you get your hopes up, you never get it. So I just let it go. About 2 miles later, they called and said, David Gordon Green wants to meet you. Can you come back? And and the rest is history. As I understand it, as soon as Malak and David and all those guys met me, it was done. It was meant to be.
Yeah. I want to kind of do a fun thing going back and forth. And so going back to 1978, you know, so much of your performance, you know, the slight head tilts, the slow, stalking, predatory walk-in nature of Michael Myers has become iconic. But my understanding was none of that was really talked about or engineered. So, you know, was it at all? Or was that just you doing it? Like,
No, yeah, mainly it was just instinctual, you know.
Yeah.
John didn't come up to me and go, here's what I want you to do. The only time I actually had that conversation when I asked him, I saw this long shot at night, and he said, you're going to see me walking, stalking her. What do you want? You want this or that or whatever? He said, just go over there and walk. Come on, we only have 10 more minutes.
Yeah.
So, you know, a lot of it was done, you know, it's like the movie itself, you know, everything suddenly, somehow, magically came together and made a great film.
Yeah.
Even this kind of stuff that you would think would have to be thought through and everything like that. James had the more difficult thing because now it's an iconic picture.
Right.
And now what do you do? You know, now what do? You manufacture it,
Yeah.
copy it, and then you have to think of all that. For me, it was easy. I just did.
Well, that's a perfect segue into my question of like, so that stuff does become iconic. And many other actors after that who portrayed Michael Myers and portrayed the shape, put on the mask, kind of put their own spin on it. But you had the interesting task of matching, because it was a direct sequel, the original, of kind of matching that stuff, because to the audience, he's the same guy. He's aged, but he's the same Michael Myers. So how much of that did you study from Nick, but then still try and kind of age him? You know what I mean?
Well, first of all, you know, what Nick created so naturally, if you look at Nick's filmography, you know, the brilliant writing, the brilliant directing, he is naturally such a high creative. So, you know, that role was filled by a high creative. It wasn't just some guy putting a mask on and walking. And so Nick imbued that character with a level of creativity that was a really fertile ground, right? And so there's a great old character actor named Ted Knight. You know, Get Caddyshack, Mary Tyler Moore Show. I met him when I first moved to Hollywood, and he was very, very generous with me. And he gave me a gift as an actor. He said, if you're an actor, learn to emulate the bartender, the guy walking in front of the street, your mother. But don't look at the way they move their hands, or don't try to talk the way they talk, or, you know, reach inside their soul. And if you can grab their soul, you will do exactly what they do. You will move the way they move, you'll speak the way they speak. And so I did that, I practiced that. And so when I got the call to go down to be put on tape, I wanted to understand what Nick had created. So I watched 1978 one time, and there's a scene where Nick is walking, camera left to camera right, in the backyard. And in my mind, again, I wasn't watching the way he walked, I wasn't looking for any of that. I was reaching into Nick's soul. And at a certain point in that scene, I went, I got it. you're not getting it back, buddy. And so I went, I got it. And so then what happened is, whatever Nick created that was drawn into me, into my being, then had to drive through the vehicle that is my body and my consciousness and my spirit. And so I have had the benefit of doing shamanic journeys in Peru with shaman, you know, ayahuasca. I've done ibogaine with African shaman. I've done peyote rituals with American First Nation shaman, and tons and tons of psychological work in terms of volunteering for family constellation therapy. So there's a whole litany of things that are built into my being that it's like a toolbox. And so what Nick created was implanted in me, and then Nick's creation had all these tools to play with, and that's the genesis of the character.
Man, wow, that's it. But now bringing it full circle, you're portraying modern Michael Myers age, but you get to come back and put on the suit and the mask and pick up the knife again in some key shots. So then what is that collaboration like as you're both doing it on set?
Well, early on, David and I, the director, David Gordon Green, and I talked about how much I would be in the movie, and I said, you know, I think what you want is a cameo, because if you have this monster over here, it's not gonna, there's not going to be any way
Yeah.
walking in.
You're not 6'3"?
I'm not 6'3", and I'm not strong, and I'm not, and there's the pot belly problem. So
He's been eating too much Halloween candy in the sanitarium.
So we kind of, you know, I just left it up to David. You put me in something and it'll be fun, and the fans will enjoy it, and we'll get some extra publicity out of it. That'll be
Yeah.
fun. So really, I'm only in one scene in that movie, the first one, where Jamie finally sees the shape. He's up in the window, and she shoots at him, and it goes through a mirror. And what's cool about it is that what she looks at and is me. When the shot is fired, I think, and it goes through the mirror, it's James. So it's like we were in the same scene together.
Cool.
So that was cool. That was
It was a passing of the baton, and Nick and I had talked about, we were hoping that we would have an iconic sort of scene where we would actually get to pass the torch.
Yeah.
And so we really felt like we got to pass the torch in that scene, which was, you know, which was really, really special for me. I mean,
It's so cool. That's so nice. And then, of course, you pop up in other cameos, you get to play a flasher, and you got to have fun.
the real Nick Castle,
Yeah,
finally.
yeah, exactly. So one last thing I want to ask about, and then we'll go to you. The iconic Dr. Pepper photo that I imagine at the time you had no idea would be iconic, and then you, of course, you know, for fun, recreated it on the set of Ends. Do you have, I've never heard the story behind the photo. We know the photo well, it's hanging on people's walls, but do you have any, was it just a candid, like, do you have any memory of, you know, what, tell us the story behind the photo, basically.
No, that's a good question. I'm not sure. Maybe Kim Gottlieb, who did all those photos that are iconic now, that were, you know, the original set photos. So she would take, we would just be hanging around, you know, between shots, doing silly things, and I'm sure that was what it was. I assume that I had the Dr. Pepper, because I never liked Dr. Pepper.
Yeah, you're a Diet Coke man.
Diet Coke. And you know, I probably had the thing on top of my head eating or something, and so I just did something silly. So, but the Dr. Pepper thing was probably, they got free Dr. Pepper for doing a shot with
There you go.
So I think Kim probably just went, Nick, hold the Dr. Pepper can, because we got to get a shot. And I went, I'm your man.
And cut to, you know, all these years later, you're just like, oh, I gotta sign this photo at another convention. Well, we had to ask that question, of course, because we're in Texas and Dr. Pepper. But, all right, let's take it to the audience. Hello, sir.
Hello, I'm Paul, I'm a Dallas resident. I've had the honor of meeting both of you guys at Frightmare a couple of years ago. It's really awesome to see you come back. I have a question for James about Halloween Kills. Now, there's a video on YouTube that's dancers that have been analyzing, but when Laurie's daughter rips off Michael's mask to lure him away, and when Michael stands up, if you crank up the volume, and it's challenging to hear this because of the music and because of the characters are panicking, but if you crank up the volume and when Michael stands, you can almost hear him whispering, "Kevin." And so my question for you, James, is that true, or does Michael actually whisper in that moment?
Complete bullshit.
Fair enough, fair enough.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. Obviously, we're here to celebrate The Shape, one of the most prolific slashers of all time. And my question for both of you is, obviously, it's a very iconic mask made from William Shatner's bleached face and all of that. But putting that on and knowing how the character is now, is there a sense of anonymity and power that you gain from putting that on that helps you get into character? I know, Nick, you said it was kind of you doing your thing, but I guess when you were doing your thing, did it feel that way? And then for James, when you had it on, was it almost like channeling that energy, I guess? I just curious about that, because obviously the mask is such an integral part of the character.
It's a good question.
Well, you know, I thought the mask was cool to begin with. You know, Tommy Lee Wallace, who found, you know, you started with the Shatner mask and then changed it into what it is now. just kind of, again, it was one of these things that just hit it out of the park. I mean, just instinctual kind of work, you know. And I remember John telling me that when Tommy modeled a couple of different things. One was another clown mask, for instance, as a possibility. But when they saw the mask come in on somebody, they just went, oh shit, that's it. So it really hits you. And even when you see some of the little kids walking around here, you know, like that, it's just
it's almost scary.
It's very ominous.
James has probably a different feel for this, but from his standpoint. But for me, it's just you become the image becomes what's scary. You know, nothing I'm doing inside the mask per se. You know, obviously, I'm not smiling at God. I'm doing anything, but it's just it's such a blank, blank slate character, and I think you fill it up, the audience, with all the the demons that are going on inside his head.
Yeah.
Well, so the character for me is a very deeply spiritual character. So the character had already been fermenting inside me. So we went down, we were doing rehearsals. We were rehearsing actually that long tracking shot, and it was before we actually started principal photography, like a day or two before. Nick, and it was late at night, about 11 o'clock at night, and Nick hadn't come in town yet. Chris Nelson, the insanely talented special effects makeup artist who created the mask and the prosthetics and such, he arrived on a plane, got right to set, had this beautiful leather halberd that looked like it came from the 1940s, and he walks in, he's got two masks in there. And the one, the principal mask, the hero mask that I'm going to wear, and then a spare mask. And so David Gordon Green, Danny McBride, Malcolm Codd, Ryan Turek, Ron Hutchinson, and myself, we were on a practical location in somebody's house. We went to a back room so nobody could see us, and I stood in the doorway so the lighting was right, and Chris, because I can't put the mask on myself, Chris came over and applied the mask to me because it's built to my face. He applied the mask to me, and collectively, everybody in the room went, "Ugh." It was like this groan, like it viscerally affected everybody in the room. To me, it felt like an 8 million amp connection. It was like, boom. I already had this in me, but when that mask came on, dog, it was not me anymore.
Yeah.
It was not me. It was something else. And so yes, and I will tell the story. My beautiful fiance, we had just met months prior in London, and on Halloween Kills, she came out to visit me after we met. She was only supposed to stay 2 weeks, ended up staying through Kills, and it looks like she's staying forever now. So we were. Our mask was off. We're by the burning house. It's getting close to the morning, so we're talking about what we're going to have for dinner, which is really breakfast. And all of a sudden, we had to go because we're losing light and the flames were right and everything. So they ran over and they put the mask on me, and it flipped her out. Because what happens to me, well, I go there anyhow when I'm not wearing the mask and the camera's rolling, but when that mask goes on, dude, and people have asked me, will I ever wear a mask and do photo ops? Not a freaking chance, dog. Not a chance. First of all, I don't want to be that, unless I'm being paid. And I don't. And seriously, y'all don't want to be near me. You really don't want to be near me when I'm in that. And so the mask is insanely. The ancients, the indigenous peoples around the world know the power of masks. They know the power that it imbues, and the spiritual power that Chris Nelson imbued that mask with is palpable. It's real. Very good question.
Thank you so much, Nolan.
I'm so glad that this is like conversational. I'm gonna pick up on something. I'm so sorry. I want to get to your question, but it feels like we're doing this direction. I think Ames was polarizing in a way that you tapped into something that's exactly like what you're talking about with the kind of passing of this kind of Michael Myers, like transversing into someone else. And I'm interested in that, knowing now that all of this went into that character from you, how much input did you have? Because I think that's really a lot of the themes of Ins. And I loved Ins in the way that it took big swings and did something that kind of tapped into kind of this idea of Michael Myers being more than just one man. He was this force. And I think it's very similar to how it sounds like you portrayed the character and what you were tapping into.
Well, David Gordon Green is hands down the best director I've ever worked with, and I've had the privilege of working with great directors, like Ron Howard, and a whole list of very, very talented directors. He is so perceptive and such a joy to work with because he doesn't miss a beat. He sees everything. So it's not a conversation he and I ever had, but he knew it.
Yeah.
Because the conversations, the small conversations we've had, and the conversations that Nick and I have had about David, it would lend me to believe that he absolutely understood what it is I had created.
Yeah.
And how that mask was affecting me.
So, I mean, just even the past, like with the mask and the mask being such an icon in that and part of the plot and being kind of this device. Like it almost like reframes the movie where I can't wait to go back and watch it again, knowing all of this, stuff that went into the character created that way. So cool, man.
There was a scene that they were about to shoot for the very, very end of the movie. I don't know if you know this or it's been revealed. And I always thought it was cool because it got you to thinking in this way. How much of the mask is Michael?
Yeah.
How much just putting the mask on creates this theme. And the last shot was you went to a factory. It wasn't the one in Halloween 3, but Silver Shamrock. They didn't have a name for it. And you went to this factory and you heard this chunk, 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 and what was coming off the conveyor belt were Michael Myers masks, and being packed away. And it was kind of like this, ooh, it's a scary moment, like, this is gonna go universal, Maybe that's what it is. It's like, it's just going to continue.
That did come out, and it was going to actually be Silver Shamrock. It was going to tie Halloween 3 in. How many Halloween 3 fans do we have? Here in Halloween 3, weird cameo, yeah, on the TV screen. All right, that's so cool. All right, yeah.
Okay, hi. I have a silly question for the little girl. But when no one is looking, is the shape running?
Just cut away, and he's like,
Have you seen Nick on a treadmill?
No.
I see, my take on this character is he's beyond 3D. So, people refer to this character when I play him as pure evil, as evil incarnate. I don't see it that way. I see a being that is what he was meant to be. You don't blame a cat for killing a mouse, right? You don't blame a whale or a whale for playing with a seal before he kills it. So for me, it's a 5-dimensional character. And if you get outside of 3D, you're outside of time and space. And if you're outside of time and space, you can, at will, be where you want to be. So this is a very metaphysical character for me. He doesn't need to run, And it's quite gratifying to know that I can walk faster than any of you motherfuckers can run.
Have you seen the show on behalf of the Rise of Leslie Vernon, the kind of mockumentary about slashers? That's the bit, is they show him just stalking and they cut up to him and he's like, oh God. And he's like flipping it around where nobody can see him. It's pretty good. All right.
Hi gentlemen, my name is Chris. I had a different question, but something just came to my mind as I was up here. Not to diss anybody's previous works, but going back to the Rob Zombie Halloween movies, one of the things that I know a lot of fans had a problem with was that Michael Myers his backstory was being expanded on, and a lot of people felt that it took away the fear that you got from just this being that we were introduced to as just this shape, this evil incarnate, as you mentioned. Do you feel that Michael Myers works better without having a backstory? Or do you feel that, that backstory kind of, humanizes him and makes people, willing to him more?
Oh, well, I personally like the idea that you don't know. I think it's just the mystery is just a better notion. It's like, it's like most mystery movies that when you find, unless it's so well done, the ending is always a disappointment. All the movies where it's like, okay, the world is going to end unless we do this, okay, it's not going to end. So you always kind of know, and then when it starts to get too logical, you kind of step ahead of the filmmakers sometimes. So that can be a problem. I mean, when you think about it, that's what David was trying to do in the last one. He was telling you how you become potentially a Michael Myers. So he went for that in this last one. Whereas I know John was very clear about not wanting to say much, or how he escapes, or how is he human, So that's always, I think, a lot more fun, because it leaves it again up to you guys to kind of fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing about filmmaking. First of all, you'll never catch me bagging at anybody's film, because just getting a film made is a minor miracle. I mean, the components that have to come together, the elements that have to come together to make a film, it's monumental. And a lot of what happens when you're making a film is you don't really know what the outcome is going to be. You have an idea, everybody collectively works as hard as they possibly can, and then you just have to put it out in the theaters and see how it affects the audience. I agree with Nick. I think that the mystical nature of this character, which is what really grabbed me in 1978. I was in college when I saw it. I saw it in the theater. I knew it was a game changer. I would agree. But in those Rob Zombie films, the collective, including Rob, were doing the best they could. And they, maybe in hindsight, Rob would have done something different. But the simple truth is, I think what made 78 so successful and what made ours so successful was that element of the mystical element, And we don't, that's the great thing about mysticism, is we don't understand, And the things that we don't understand are the things that can really nail us. So, great question.
Yeah, I agree with what you said. It's like trying to psychoanalyze the xenomorph aliens or shark and jaws, Just this force that we can't even connect with on any human level. It's so far scarier than anything. Absolutely, yeah.
Awesome. So I have two questions, one for each one of you guys. For Nick, what was the toughest part of shooting the last Starfighter? How was that?
Skipping over to another place. Oh, well, the toughest part was doing a science fiction movie that I had no background in. I didn't know visual effects. I didn't know anything about, it was new. It was my second movie. So that was tough. What I did have that I leaned on quite a bit were some tremendous partners in that. The partners, Ron Cobb was a great artist, cartoonist, and man. He passed away recently, and so I miss him. And a good friend that I still have lunch with, James Bissell, who was the production designer of E.T. So I had a great team. So I guess the challenge there was almost overwhelming, was being in the right place at the right time without the skills to do the work. So that was scary.
Well, I'd like to say that is actually one of my absolute favorite movies.
Thank you.
For James, I'd like to know, if you were able to play any other horror character, like Jason or Ghostface, who would you want to play?
I've been asked that question, more than a few times. And to be perfectly honest, I would not want to play any other character.
That's understandable.
I feel very honored to have been able to play this character. It's a role of a lifetime in so many respects. I think especially when it comes to, I happen to be a big fan of Robert Englund's Freddy. But I think, to cross-pollinate for me would dilute what it is I got to experience with this. So I would prefer to know that I'm going to play another character, an original character at some point, that will be mine, you know. But I'm not a, for instance, I would have had second thoughts if somebody wanted me to do a remake of 1978. I don't like remakes, and I don't hope to ever do one, unless someone pays me so much doggone money that I have to. You know? So yeah, I mean, yeah.
Thank you for the answer.
Thanks. All right, so we're gonna we gotta wrap up here soon, but we don't have that many questions left. So if we could kind of rapid fire through them, love to try and get through all of them.
Gentlemen, how are y'all?
Yeah, man.
All right. Were there any attempts, anyone on set that tried to make you break character? And then did anyone ever came close?
No, not at all.
I think we've learned through this panel, like, don't fuck with this guy. Maybe is the running theme.
I kind of got that from him.
Yeah.
No, I'd stand off to the side and not talk to anybody unless I had to. When we're shooting a scene, when the mask is off and we're not shooting a scene, then I'm just me. So I breathe the character in, I'm existing in that character, I stand off to the side. Attila, the first AD, used to call me the Buddha shape because I would just stand off almost in a meditative place, and then when I came to work, I'd go to work. There was just enough of my personality there, so if David called me and said, Jimmy, look at this other thing, what do you think of this? Or, shape, what do you want to do here? Or what do you think? Or let's audition this. Then a little processing would happen. Other than that, so I think everybody understood, for all of us, the sacred nature of the movie and the sacred nature of the character.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
James, 5 years ago, Halloween 2018 was my gateway drug into horror that I couldn't think enough. And Nick, thank you for portraying this character in the first place to create a legacy that will never die. Speaking of legacy, if there ever were a new portrayal of Michael Myers, what advice would you give to that actor to keep the legacy lived on and faithful to the character in the first place?
What do you think, Nick?
I would just say good luck.
Just walk from point A to point B. You'll be great.
Just walk.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's things like that. I would just say, make it your own, man. I wouldn't want to poison a person's mind with my opinion, because I think if someone were hired, especially by the likes of David Gordon Green or someone like John Carpenter or any other brilliant person, obviously that person's got the goods. So, and that's a great thing about working with David Gordon Green is David. I got no direction on character from David other than he wanted me to move like a cat. He called me up at my house. He goes, okay, let's talk about the character, Jimmy. I want you to move like a cat. I was like, funny, I got a cat in my lap, and I watch him. I study him. I watched him kill. I mean, and he goes, okay, we're good, and that was it.
Awesome, big fan.
And as we saw in spoiler for anyone who hasn't seen it, we kind of said a finite or final goodbye to your version of Michael Myers. But as we well know as fans of this franchise, he's had his head cut off. He's gone through all kinds of sorts of death, and Michael Myers can never die. So this franchise, I think, will never die.
Dude, not when you gross $300 million.
No. You can put him in whatever kind of grinder you want, and he will be back. So someone will put on the mask at some point.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks.
Gentlemen, thank you for being here. Wallace, thank you for moderating. My question to you both is kind of about the same. Nick, are there any lessons that you took from John Carpenter working on set with him? And kind of a rephrase for James, were there any lessons that you took from David Gordon Green that you've been able to take to other sets?
Yeah, I learned a lot from just working on a set, let alone, and specifically from John, because John had a great camera eye and a real sense of camera movement that I was probably a little too shy to try. When back in the day, especially, those cameras are like gigantic pieces of machinery. And the idea of, and every time you move it, it's another 20 minutes at least of someone saying, okay, now we got to change the light. And so it's like, he was able to think through all that, beforehand, and think through how much of that time is going to cost him. It's all a lot of physics in motion pictures when it comes down to it. and time management. That's what I learned from John, and just also, he always talked about movement in terms of camera, and I took that to heart.
Yeah, that's a great question. I've had the, as I said, the great benefit of having worked with really, really talented directors. David Gordon Green, more than any other director I've ever worked with, checked his ego at the door. He opened up, it's an open sandbox. Basically, he created the parameters, but he was open to eliciting creativity from any person that was on the set. His ego, now, he doesn't suffer fools gladly. He doesn't waste time, but he is so open, and what that taught me, because I have not directed yet, so what that taught me was to trust the people you hire to the nth degree, because that's why you hire them. And David Gordon Green, his belief in me and his belief in everybody else was so powerful and so supportive. It's like the most ideal situation you get in any situation in life, when you have a person in your life who totally believes in you. It empowers you to be the best you can possibly be. So I took a massive lesson from David Gordon Green. I'm eternally grateful for him.
Great, thank you. All right, we're going to get through these last few. Let's go rapid fire. Do you have the mask? Or is
I
this
do
just
have a
casual?
mask. My mask is over.
All right.
I do have it.
So you didn't just get off work at like...
I did. I would have. I probably would have showed
It's
up.
comfy. It's a
nice suit. Keeps me warm.
Yeah.
Even though it's hot. It's a nice suit. I like it. I just wanted to know, out of the new trilogy, which ones were your favorite out of all three of them?
Well, I have to say, for me, it's all one movie. 2018 is the first act, Halloween Kills is the second act, the third act is Halloween Ends. So there is no favorite. I have a favorite scene, and that would be the finale with Jamie. One of the most powerful things I've ever done. When we stepped aside before we shot that, I called her over, I was like, Jamie, let's go beat by beat. And so we went beat by beat, and as we were going through, we had tears streaming down. And as we're acting, as we're in this moment, like at one point when they're putting prosthetics on me and resetting lights, she stood next to me. I was laying at the table and I couldn't move. She held my hand for an hour. She closed her eyes and she held my hand. We had such a deep emotional experience together. And it truly was, as actors who commit themselves 100% to what they're doing, both of us went through this period where each of us as the beings didn't know if we were going to die. At a certain point, she wanted to die. At a certain point, I wanted to die. At a certain point, I wanted not to die and I wanted to kill her. So that was the most powerful experience. But for me, it's all one big movie.
Well, as an audience member, I thought 2018 was the far superior of the three. I just thought first of all, it needed to be in a way because it had to create the impetus for the other two. But to me, I was just very pleased saying, they really, because at that time you didn't know how it was going to affect the audience, you didn't know how it was going to be, have a link to the past. And I just thought it was very clever, very well done, and solid.
I'm glad you mentioned Jamie because I think Michael Myers is just one part of a two-person dance. That collaboration, not only between the characters, of course, you can call it a collaboration, but collaboration between you as actors and Jamie. It's so, there's a reason that she's our Scream Queen and now Oscar-winning Jamie Lee Curtis. But, I think people think of them as separate, but the way they're intertwined is so fascinating. And it's nice to hear that the actual, off-camera relationship was like that too. It's powerful. Yeah, it is. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For Halloween Kills with the 1978 flashback scene, I was just wondering how you felt seeing all that set come back to life and having that aesthetic again, and then also, James, for you to essentially kind of literally be stepping into Nick's shoes for that particular part of the movie. I was just wondering how
That's
you
a
felt
great
about
question. Yeah.
What I remember, the thing that pops to mind when you say that, it was fun to go on the set, to see the set, to see the old house again.
Yeah.
So that was fun. They did that interior in Wilmington, I think. And so that was fun. As far as the scenes are concerned, I thought, I did a good job. James will tell you about the way that was produced.
So David Gordon Green is a purist, so he did not want me to play the flashback. He wanted somebody who was young, and because he wanted a young Michael Myers. And so they looked at over 200 people trying to find somebody who could move like I did, and they couldn't. But they used Aaron Armstrong, who was the stunt coordinator. It turns out Aaron Armstrong and I, he's a kung fu guy basically, but I've done decades of martial arts as well. And one of the arts I practiced for a little over 10 years is Aikido, a combination of Aikido and Kali. And in Aikido, you don't leave your feet. There's no kicking. You know, it's very smooth. It's gliding. It's almost like the whirling dervishes. You know, the Sufi dancers. Well, Aaron had practiced about 10 years of Aikido as well. And so when they brought Aaron in, Aaron and I talked about it, and I just explained to him very briefly how I moved, and it's a physical technique. And that's why 200 people tried to emulate the movement, and they couldn't because they had no physical awareness of what that was. Aaron did, and I think Aaron did a jam-up job playing the retro shape. That's the way it happened.
Well, thanks. Great question. All right, last few.
Hi, I just wanted to ask, so we all know that Michael was like a soulless, psychotic killer, and he just
He's a nice guy, come on, man.
Misunderstood.
Well, yeah, anyway. And you guys seem like really nice people with such full character and personality. What's it like watching yourselves on screen just mercilessly butcher people without any emotion?
Personally, I hate watching myself on screen. When I'm in front of the camera, when I'm working, whether I'm acting, and even if it's a really deep scene with heavy emotion, if I'm doing a stunt, if I'm doing a high fall or crashing a car or fighting with live blades, or I feel zero stress, zero anxiety. I wish I could live my life in front of a moving picture camera because it's really my wheelhouse. It's where I feel the most comfortable with myself as a being. I hate watching myself on the screen. I do it because it's a part of the game. Yeah, and I love the red carpet. I love the all that. To be with my friends, and the party part of it's fun. But when I sit down in a theater and I watch myself on the screen, I sweat freaking bullets. I mean, I got big armpit stains, and like there's a big wet spot on the ground below me. So I hate it. I hate it.
I mean, as we've all learned, being conventions, often the most psychopathic killers on screen are like the nicest guys off screen. So,
well, Basil Rathbone is a spirit guide for me. And Basil Rathbone was not only the highest paid character actor of his day, he played some of the most iconic bad guys, and he also played Sherlock Holmes. But he was in Son of Frankenstein, but he played a bunch of bad guys. And Basil Rathbone was renowned for being one of the kindest, most deeply spiritual and generous human beings on the planet, and that's my friend here.
Aww. Thank you. Great question.
From my standpoint, I see all the tricks. So looking at something I'm in, or even if James is in it, I'm looking for the tricks. And so it kind of ruins the movie for me personally. So I don't the ones that really get me, I have no affinity for, or have not affinity, but no relationship to, where I wasn't in the set and I wasn't thinking about how they did this or what is actually coming out of their mouths or things like that.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
My question is pretty much how, between the both of y'all, has there ever been like a little sense of like competition? Like, I bet my Myers can kick your Myers.
This man and I, and we're close friends. We spend a lot of time together. We talk, we text, we have dinner, hang out at his house. We have never talked about this character. We have never said a single word about this character to each other.
But I am stronger and handsomer.
I mean, we literally had to do a panel just to get you to talk about his character. So.
But I can walk faster.
Thanks, that's a great question.
Hey gentlemen, it's an honor to be in front of you, and thank you very much for our hosts also.
Happy to be here.
So my question is for both of y'all, but in 1978, And I know that there was probably like a lot going on during the time, but what was Michael Myers' playlist, if there was any music you were listening to get into the character?
Only Blue Oyster Cult over and over.
The mamas and the papas.
Just more cowbell, more cowbell.
The only reason I say that is because I know that like a lot of what you're doing on camera in these scenes, it's almost a waltz. The killings of a waltz, you know, the dance.
Yeah.
And it only gets more methodical as the movies go along. And then you have to pick that up. So whether there's anything like in relationship to music you were listening to, during takes, in between takes?
No, not really. I mean, that sounds like something one would do now using John's score. In fact, there's a good story about Kobe Bryant, the great Laker, said that whenever he was going into a big game, he would play John's music.
Oh,
and
man.
he would be the killer. You know, he's going to be, you know, Kobe the killer.
If you know John, he's the biggest basketball fan and former Lakers fan until LeBron. I think it's probably the biggest compliment anyone has ever paid him. Wow.
Yeah. Well, I got to tell you. Okay, so Chris Nelson, you know, the special effects makeup guy. I start my day in his trailer, and I would spend anywhere from an hour and a half to, you know, to 3 hours. Well, actually 5 hours, you know, it ends. But every single morning, whether it was 6 in the morning or 6 at night, we started. He would have read the call sheet. We have very similar musical tastes. Primarily David Bowie being one of his major influences. David Bowie is hands down my biggest artistic influence across the board. So, so he would read the call sheet from the night before. You know, I'm a musician, he's a musician. I mean, I'm a hack, he's good. But he would read the call sheet and intuit what we should listen to the next day. So it might be, you know, it could be the Ramones, it could be David Bowie, it could be blues, it could be jazz, it could be, and I never knew what was going to happen. But whatever it was perfect for the day's work, for what we were going to do. So it's a very good question.
That's good.
Yeah, good. All right, sir. Last question.
No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure. Don't fuck it up.
So earlier you mentioned it was a two-way dance, right? And
Yeah.
oh Lord, but I think there's a third person, Luz.
Okay. Yeah.
So my question is, especially for you, you know, reading the original script, is he a terrible psychiatrist?
We're talking about Loomis?
Dr. Loomis.
Dr.
Yeah.
Loomis, yeah. No, he's just, again, he's up against a force that no one could actually help. So we'll have to give him a pass.
Fair enough. So Michael was beyond therapy. He shouldn't beat himself up over that. Yeah.
He's definitely the psychiatrist that's best at math.
He's really good at teaching.
Really good at math.
Writing, I think, like he had to have taught him
How many shots he can keep track of. He's great at that.
And no one knows that not only was his psychiatrist, but also he taught him how to drive.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm always right.
It's true. It was brilliant of John to throw that line in there. Yeah. I would love to end on you. You know, we kind of started talking about Jamie Lee, but I think we can't talk enough about Jamie Lee. I would love for you to kind of just both reflect on what that collaboration was like with her. I mean, she is so special to all of us, and probably no more special to you two gentlemen. So, what was that just kind of collaboration like on these films?
Well, I'll go first because you have more actually.
The alpha and the omega is what
No, mainly when I worked with Jamie on the first picture, I saw her, of course, in the sequels, the new ones, and we spent a little bit of time together just laughing about how crazy it was to be doing this 40 years later. But on the first one, she was a 19-year-old ingenue, just a very pretty girl on the set, and I knew her parents. She was a second-generation Hollywood kid, and I was a second-generation Hollywood kid. My dad was a choreographer, and we just talked about things and had a blast. No one was iconic at that point. No one was a movie star. That's how I remember her, and in a way, that's who she is today. She has a big personality. And I think she's grown into that she's always been a very sweet woman as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so I'm getting the tail end of this, and not only knowing, what she did with Halloween, but her epic, movie career, and a profoundly talented, actor. She is such a profoundly intelligent, witty, self-deprecating woman. She's a poster child for an empowered woman. I was raised by a strong woman. I have a deep appreciation for strong women. I'm a firm believer in human empowerment, which absolutely includes empowering females, and I think we've got a long way to go with that. So to work with a woman who's that solid, and she's been sober 22 years. She, at that time, she'd been sober, 18 or 19, I don't know, it was 2018. So I gave her space in the beginning, because I didn't know how she worked as an actor. You always have to respect the way another actor works. So I gave her space. She came over and introduced herself to me. We had a brief chat, and then I didn't talk to her again until a couple weeks later when we were in the same makeup trailer. And all of a sudden she marches over and she goes, okay, let's talk about this fucking fight scene. And I was like, all right, here we go, man. Now I want to see the real Jamie. And it was just really wonderful because she's such a pro. And in our business, the highest compliment you can give somebody is go, you're a real pro. Or that guy's a real pro. And Jamie is a real pro. And so, to know that you're working with somebody who's going to give as much as she's going to get, who's going to get as much as she's going to give, who's going to be there 1,000%, that's Jamie. And so, when Sarah and I were out in Hollywood, and we saw her win the Oscars, we just had tears just rolling. I actually feel kind of emotional right now, man. It makes me so happy to see this woman finally get the accolade she deserves because she deserves it.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think this franchise is really special to, the horror community has felt so male-dominated in so many ways, and yet there's so, Deborah Hill, Jamie in front of the camera, Deborah Hill behind it. This franchise, I think, and those movies are so important in that representation. You look out and horror represents all different types of people, not just straight white male dudes. And so, we love her so much for that, and I love that you all had that collaboration, and that feels so part of it in the spirit. So thank you both. This was incredible. I got to work on the panels behind the scenes, and so I got to have fun with it, and it's kind of like a toy. So to get to pair you together in a conversation was so special, and it was everything I could have dreamed of and more. So thank you so much. And
Another round of applause for our two shapes. Stick around. It's next up at 4 o'clock is It's Weird and It's Pissed Off, 40 years of the thing. So we're keeping our John Carpenter celebration going all day. Another round of applause.